안녕하세요. 오늘도 운동을 하겠습니다. 일단 오늘 아침에 영어 학원이랑 수영을 갔어야 되는데 못 갔습니다. 너무 피곤해서 못 일어났어요. 진짜 막 술에 취한 것처럼 아침에 못 일어나겠어요. 그래서 오늘 진짜 출근하기 직전까지 잠을 잤고요. 그다음에 퇴근해서 지금 왔는데 지금 너무 졸려요. 너무 졸리지만 아침에 운동 많이 안 했으니까 오늘은 좀 운동 좀 많이 하려고 스트레칭도 하고 팔굽혀펴기, 윗몸 일으키기, 그다음에 이거 아령도 이것도 좀 들어보고 30분 꽉 채워서 운동하려고 여기로 왔습니다. 저쪽 방 가면은 턱걸이밖에 안 해서 턱걸이 하다가 게임하다 턱걸이 하다 게임하다 해가지고 일단 여기로 왔습니다. 운동을 해야겠죠? 역시 운동할 땐 CNN.
Wow, American ally France says, quote, today we wake up to a more dangerous world. That can be agreed upon. Joining me now to discuss, Barbara Leaf, former U.S. ambassador to the UAE, and CNN military analyst and retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. Thanks to both of you. You've got enormous experience in the region, both as diplomats and as soldiers. Barbara, if I could begin with you. This is a threat not just to uniformed military in the region, but to Americans, whether civilians or diplomats serving abroad. What is the danger to them today, and what can be done today to protect embassies, diplomats in their homes, etc.? What's your level of concern?
Well, look, in situations such as these, normally the administration, the State Department, along with other agencies, sends out alerts in advance to missions that they think are in harm's way to basically batten down the hatches. But as a number of your speakers have pointed out, there's a surplus of targets across the Gulf and across the region. I frankly don't expect anything from Iran in the immediate days. I think there will be reprisals, but I would also be concerned that those reprisals will come against targets of our partners in the Gulf, perhaps not taking on the U.S. directly.
It's interesting as you speak there, Barbara. We're hearing that U.S. embassies in Bahrain, Pakistan, elsewhere in the region are now issuing security alerts to their staff here. In light of this, that's natural, it's warranted. General Mark Hertling, you commanded forces in Iraq. Soleimani has been on the other side, as you have been on the ground there. And I know, and I'm sad to say, and I think we should remind our viewers that you've lost soldiers under your command to IEDs supplied by Soleimani and his Quds force. You know the danger, but I want to ask about the danger today to U.S. forces in the region. Secretary Pompeo says Americans are safer as a result of this strike. Is that true, or are they more at risk?
I don't concur with the Secretary's assessment, whereas this certainly could have prevented some kind of attack, like the Secretary said. And truthfully, Jim, in this day and age, it's hard to do this, but I'm going to say I trust the intelligence assessment of what Soleimani was doing, the kinds of actions he was preparing for. So I'm sure that they had some really good intelligence on some potential attacks. So no, I'm not in agreement that it is going to make the region safer. It certainly is not going to make our allies safer in the region. And it is going to come, as the ambassador just said, in the form of attacks that some of us are familiar with, but it will go beyond that. The asymmetric warfare, and I'll give a plug to your book, that you give such great examples of, talking about what Russia is doing, what Iran is doing. This general was a clone of another general in Russia, Gerasimov, who used asymmetric warfare and the power of government and the power of politics to bring conflict to nation, not just military forces. We are trained in overt use of military forces, a drone strike, a conventional fight, a counterinsurgency, a counter-terrorist action. This guy, with his portfolio and his number of forces, has been training and arcing his background across a wide area using asymmetric warfare.
Yeah, they call it the Gerasimov Doctrine, even. It's about warfare on multiple fronts at all times. I call it the shadow war in my book, but hybrid warfare tactics, and Soleimani was expert at it. Barbara Leaf, let me ask you, so this is a tactical success. You've taken out a bad guy via military action. What is the strategy here? What's next? Because when President Trump came into office, there was a nuclear deal. Iran's nuclear program was at least under limits. It's now expanding that nuclear program and in fact, carrying out more hostile acts in the region. Is there a strategy that you can discern here for dealing with Iran?
Not as yet.
Well,
Not as yet.
so-
Although the president tweeted out overnight a tweet that was a bit perplexing, but was clearly signaling to the Iranians, yes, I've hit somebody, I've hit one of your guys, but let's not forget about negotiations. I don't know that that's going to be a very compelling message for the Iranian leadership in the days ahead. I think the administration's strategy, such as it is, has suffered chronically for the past year as to where it was going and how it was going to lead to negotiations, the ostensible purpose of the maximum pressure campaign. That's still an open question. I agree with Mark. There, I'll take it on face value that there was compelling intelligence reasons of an imminent threat to respond. I think doing it on Iraqi soil has its own dimensions of complexity, and that's what I'm most concerned about in the days ahead.
And you already hear from Iraqi officials responding to that, saying that this is a violation of the agreement with the U.S. for the status of its forces in Iraq. General, news is coming in as we speak. We're learning that Soleimani will have a funeral in both Iraq and Iran. Interesting, in that he has following in both places there. I wonder, is it possible that he is, if not more dangerous, still dangerous as a martyr than as he was as a general?
It's interesting you say that, Jim, because in part of the intelligence read I read many years ago about Soleimani, they called him the living martyr. He was as valuable to Khomeini alive as he would have been as a martyr dead. So in taking on this martyrdom role as he's doing right now, the implications of this with followers of Shia, and this is going to outrage Shia no matter what side of the equation they live in. If they're partly pro-Americans, which many of them are, or most of them contrary to Americans, they are all going to see this as an attack on the Tehran government, and it's going to be chaotic for a while. I disagree with Ambassador Leaf a little bit. I think we will see some actions, very covert, from the Iranian government, and it could take the form of various PMF forces conducting action throughout the range of their swath of land between Lebanon and Tehran, but it could be certainly cyber attacks. And the stoking of an increasing number of cyber attacks, and even some homeland security issues. As we know, there is a network of Iranian elements within the United States that the FBI is watching. All of those things to me are scary, and I come down on the side of we've got to be prepared for what's going to result from this action.
You mentioned the U.S. homeland. Soleimani has publicly threatened attacks on the U.S. homeland, and the U.S. believes he was behind a plot to carry out an assassination in Washington, D.C., in a busy restaurant in 2011. Barbara Leaf, Lieutenant General Hertling, thanks to both of you. I know we're going to be coming back to you in the coming days. We're going to get reaction next from a Republican member of the Armed Services Committee, also a veteran. What's his response to this assassination? Stay with us.
The journey to the top for a successful business in Africa starts with an idea. But how does a concept become a moneymaker? African and global industry leaders share their stories. Sunday on Profit Point in CNN Marketplace Africa in association with Dangote.
You're a national hero now. I was just doing my job.
Richard Jewell fits the profile of the lone bomber.
Your client is guilty as hell.
Richard is not a murderer. He saved people's lives. Please tell the world my son is innocent.
All new African Voices Changemakers. opportunities, impact communities, transform lives. Pilots inspire a new generation to spread their wings.
My vision for the future through my work, where a small child can just wake up like, I'm gonna do that one day.
African Voices Changemakers on CNN.
Want a daily dose of Fareed and his team? Now you can get it with Fareed's Global Briefing, the newsletter that gives you the best insight and analysis on global affairs. Go to cnn.com/Fareed to sign up.
I'm Nick Robinson in Aden, Yemen, and this is CNN.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
Every other industry is getting disrupted. Why would ours be any different? What will it look like? I'm not sure. So in 2009, I formed my own venture capital fund to invest just in mobility solutions. Not even sure what that meant really. And it was because I knew that fundamentally our business was going to have to change.
This is CNN.
The assassination of a top Iranian military leader is sending shockwaves through financial markets around the world. The Dow now falling. Investors worried about a volatile situation in the Middle East, particularly concerned their oil prices. They are surging because the Middle East not only home to major oil producing countries, but also key supply routes, which remember, Iran has attacked in the past. Joining me now to discuss, Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin. He's on the Armed Services Committee, but we should also note he served in the United States Marines in Iraq in 2007-2008. Congressman, we appreciate you taking the time this morning.
Thanks for having me.
You served in Iraq in 2007-2008 at really some of the worst moments of the Iraq War, at a time, in fact, when Soleimani's Quds forces that he controls were supplying powerful IEDs, which killed, by the Pentagon's estimate, more than 600 U.S. soldiers, of course, wounded thousands more. What does this assassination mean to you and other veterans who served on the ground there?
Well, I think it means that we've taken Iran's most dangerous warrior off the battlefield. And as you referenced, that's 1 out of every 6 combat fatalities in Iraq. So Soleimani was a mass murderer, not only in Iraq. He not only had American blood on his hands, but he's responsible for the death of thousands around the region. He is the architect of the Hezbollah model throughout the region, whereby Iran builds proxies in places like Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen to threaten our interests. And indeed, Soleimani is the man responsible for taking Iran away from the Iraqis and making it
와, 14분밖에 안 됐어요.
satrap and potentially
30분 넘게 한 것
operating
같은데.
base to attack Saudi Arabia and Israel.
As you know, and you mentioned them, Iran has enormous capabilities in the region and around
확실히
the world.
턱걸이 할 때보다 이렇게 팔굽혀펴기랑 이렇게 세트별로 여러 개 하는 게
There are
더
thousands
힘듭니다.
of
땀도
US
나고 확실히.
forces deployed now around the region. In addition to that, US diplomats and civilians, which Iran has not been shy about attacking before. Are those interests, are those Americans at risk today, at greater risk today than they were before this assassination, as Iran contemplates and threatens, in fact, retaliation?
Well, I think it's important to remember that Iran has indeed been engaged in systematic escalation for the better part of the last year. They attacked our shipping vessels in the region and those of our allies. They downed an American drone. They attacked the Abqaiq facility in Saudi Arabia. And we actually were very measured in terms of not responding to those incidents. And now we established a clear red line of don't kill Americans. And if you do, we will respond. And we have enforced that red line. And so I just would argue that it's the Iranians that have been escalating. I would argue further that it is inaction that is the most provocative, and that President Trump has absolutely made the right call here. He has sent a very simple and strong signal that if you kill Americans, we will kill you.
Should Americans be prepared for war with Iran today?
Well, the whole paradox of deterrence is that in order to avoid war, you have to be prepared to go to war. And it is my hope that this bold action, this strong action, restores our deterrent posture. It is fundamentally a defensive action. It is prudent deterrence, and thereby will allow us to stand strong with our allies in the region in order to avoid war. And I would further note that Iran is in an increasingly weak position regionally. It's in an increasingly weak position politically, domestically. There are anti-Iran protests in Iraq, in Iran itself, and in Lebanon. And so I think we have an opportunity to de-escalate, and Iran should know that we will be prepared to respond if our people are threatened.
When you served in Iraq, you served alongside General Petraeus, this under George W. Bush, of course. General George W. Bush listened to Petraeus. He listened and consulted with his advisors before he made decisions. This is a president who often has ignored or surprised even his advisors with decisions. For instance, the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Syria, which I should note you opposed here. In this again, Senator Lindsey Graham, he's chairman of the Judiciary Committee, not one of the Gang of Eight, who of the relevant committees. He was informed in advance. Are you confident in a president that consistently bypasses the national security structure that is designed to help him make difficult decisions like this?
Well, I don't think that's the case here, because I know for a fact that this target package was under discussion for days, if not weeks, if not months. This has been something that the administration has been debating for a while, whether or not to take Mohandas and Soleimani off the battlefield. So I would say this is actually an instance where, over the course of at least 11 attacks against our interests by Iran, the president has chosen to either not respond or respond with things below the threshold of the use of force, like cyber weapons. And now he consulted with his generals, he consulted with the Secretary of Defense, and decided to take bold action against Soleimani so that the Iranians don't continue to escalate. So I just don't agree that that criticism is apposite in this case.
Let's ask then what the goal is with this policy here. We had John Bolton, until recently, was the national security advisor to the president, praising this. He, like you, says that this decision in his tweet was long in the making, but he goes on to say, hope this is a first step to regime change in Iran, something Bolton has championed before. Is that what Americans should prepare for here, that the intention is to change the regime in Iran?
I don't think that's the goal that Secretary Pompeo has laid out. Indeed, Secretary Pompeo has talked exclusively about behavior change in Iran. We have no problem with the Iranians deciding the future of Iran themselves. Indeed, we look forward to a day when the Iranian people are able to have more of a say in their own future and aren't dominated by the clerical, evil, theocratic regime that keeps them oppressed. However, we will not stand idly by while that regime exports terrorism, while it continues to threaten our interests, kill Americans, and threaten our allies in the region. So it is all about behavior change, and then hopefully the Iranians will be able to change their regime democratically at one day in the future.
I want to ask you quickly before we go about impeachment, a Senate trial looming here. During the House process here, House Republicans argued there was no direct link between the president's decision between the decision to withhold aid from Ukraine and the president himself. We now have emails, which were blocked by the White House, but now been released through good reporting by Just Security, showing the opposite. One email from the OMB to the Department of Defense, obtained by Just Security, said the following: clear direction from POTUS to continue to hold. Can you and other Republicans still argue that this was not the president's decision to withhold the aid?
Well, the president has the authority to withhold aid for a variety of reasons. The president has had a long
But the Pentagon said it was an illegal decision.
In general.
Pentagon officials protested and said that this broke the law because Congress had appropriated the funds.
Well, you talked earlier about the president ignoring the interagency process. This is how the interagency process works. You have various stakeholders that have different opinions. Oftentimes, it's the State Department arguing against the Pentagon. In this case, the president withheld aid for potentially a variety of reasons. As it pertains to the impeachment trial, as I understand it, Mitch McConnell isn't foreclosing the possibility of witnesses. He's merely insisting on the same Clinton
오늘 여기까지 하겠습니다.
unanimously agreed to by people
오늘도
including
성공.
Chuck Schumer at the end in 1999. And usually have opening arguments,
20분밖에 안 했지만
questions, and then
너무
you decide
힘들어요.
on witnesses from there. So if there's more to be investigated, I'm sure they'll get to it. I haven't followed the machinations of the Senate.